in a very short time, and that's the main problem we face at the moment. Which I'll hand over to Cos to tell you about the other side of the story.
So, yes, I'm the odd one in the room, the odd one out. I've lived in the UK for about 23 years, which is, well, overall outside of Italy for 27. I lived for 4 years in Brussels as well. And I've only just recently moved back. So I'm Italian, I'm fully Italian. But I did take British citizenship in 2012, well before the whole Brexit thing even loomed on the horizon, and it was just simply because I wanted to have a vote in political elections. Because I work in politics. Well, I work in international development, but I've always worked with politicians, and I just simply wanted to vote, so that's how it happened. I was still part of the sister campaign of the British in Europe, which is known as the 3 Million, taking the name from roughly the number of EU 27 citizens. There's more of us actually, more like 3.8 million really, living in the UK. And similar story really. I mean, we were all completely shell-shocked after the vote. And we all pulled together. The 3 Million started in Bristol with a group of French citizens that called a public meeting, and then it spread like wildfire, mostly on social media. We also have a Facebook forum with well over 40,000 members, followers, whatever you call them. And I personally got involved after, I think, Gareth got involved, and they had this initial hearing. I was involved in the group at the time. One of the things that they got told when they went to London to give evidence to the committee was, well, what are you doing in Brussels? Why are you coming to us? You know, the whole problem is EU made, and you know you've got to ask the EU to guarantee your rights, of course, as they would. And so that's how I got brought in, because of my Brussels past. I actually used to work as a political assistant at the European Parliament, and I've always worked on EU matters, EU issues. I was brought in as the EU expert. And you know, next thing we knew, we wrote to Michel Barnier, and they invited us straight away, because actually I have to say, echo Jeremy, the stance, the approach of the UK government has been appalling and completely untransparent. We've had very little access, although we tried. You bet we tried. Whereas it's been completely the opposite in Brussels. So we wrote to Michel Barnier as a group of concerned citizens. You know, the 3 million wasn't all that well known at the time, and neither was British in Europe. And they invited us to meet Michel Barnier straight away. In fact, we went to meet Michel Barnier the day before Article 50 was triggered in the UK, on the 28th of March 2017. High-level meeting with Michel Barnier. And then it all snowballed from there. There was a group of very concerned members of the European Parliament, cross-party, cross-nationality. We had a few good high-level cases in the media, a bit like the Windrush generation, but you know, over a year before the Windrush generation thing kicked off. My friend and colleague Monique Hawkins, I think, was the first case of a Dutch citizen that had been denied citizenship and permanent residence, I think, at the time, because she didn't have yet permanent residence, although she'd lived most of her life in the UK. So a journalist at The Guardian, Lisa Carroll, started reporting all these cases, and it just grew and grew and grew. And as Jeremy said, we worked side by side and went to Brussels many times. We also have 3 mass lobbies in the UK Parliament, and basically, as Jeremy was saying, it's true. I mean, we've been in the same boat, and the messages have always been very similar, because we saw each other, we saw ourselves as a finite group of people that had been caught, you know, like children in a divorce, that you know, with 2 warring parties trying to decide on our future. The one thing I wanted to say was sort of convey how bad things have been in the UK for European nationals, and the feeling, somebody asked me earlier, how bad was it, how bad is it? It has descended into utter chaos. You couldn't make it up. But the whole politicisation of citizens' rights, us, European nationals, being called bargaining chips and bargaining capital, right at the start of the negotiations, set the tone for what happened next. It was the politicisation of that, and also of free movement. That's why I was saying there's a reason why you've been deprived of your freedom of movement. That's because, and as you will have seen, in everything that Theresa May and the government has said, they completely, particularly of late, it pivots around freedom of movement because of the shambles of what's happened with the negotiations and the deal that's on the table at the moment. The one victory that they're claiming is ending freedom of movement once and for all, and this is a direct quote from Theresa May's. It's as if it was eradicating malaria. It's that. And unfortunately, and I know that Jane Golding, who is the chair of the British in Europe, who I've worked with for the past 2 years, it's that. The wanting to curtail the citizens' rights of European nationals and bring freedom of movement to an end. This is what's happened because of this principle of reciprocity, which was put in place originally by the European Union as a safeguard. It turned into a dagger, a proper political dagger. And that's what's happened. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy. This is my, and I've been in all the meetings up till now in the Commission, arguing, even getting emotional, very emotional at times. I mean, I'm from the generation, like you are, presumably, who were brought up believing in the European project and believing that, it's just all one territory. I left Italy when I was 18 to go and study in London. As I've stayed there most of my life. I'm a product, as many of you are, I'm sure, of this European dream. And it's been shattered. It's been shattered. I think the one thing that I've learnt is I feel so much more jaded now about the whole thing. I mean, so jaded that I upped and came back to this country. I don't know if we made the right decision. I've got 3 kids that were born in the UK. They hate me for dragging them away from London. But it's really upended people's lives. And if you want to read more about all the emotional side and the testimonies, there should be a leaflet on your chairs with a very powerful book called In Limbo, which was the original book, which collected testimonies from European nationals such as myself. There's a testimony from me in there. Because people had, and still do very much, particularly at this stage, where we still don't know where we stand, there's been an emotional baggage and mental health problem linked to the situation of European nationals in the UK, as well as, of course, the situation of British people living in the EU. So we did a second book, in fact, we didn't, but there's a separate group, which is a sister group, the In Limbo group, which did a second book called In Limbo 2, which is about testimonies from British citizens living in the EU. So if you haven't read it, I would urge you to do so. It's been handed out to all key politicians in the UK, internationally, in Brussels, just to convey this feeling that I want to convey to you. The 2 key things that this whole politicisation of citizens' rights have led to have been a curtailing of family reunification, which has been despicable, and the battle we have battled to try to keep family reunification, and we tried to do that as much as we could, but it was curtailed, partly curtailed, and then of course freedom of movement. So I would say that these are the 2 key victims of, as well as a political rights, of course, because the one thing that we haven't mentioned is that we don't know what political rights we will have, either as Europeans living in the UK. Of course, Europeans living in the UK never had a vote in political elections, as I said, that's why I took citizenship. But even in the local elections, because this has been deemed to be a matter of national sovereignty, as it should, it hasn't been included in the withdrawal agreement. So even if there was a withdrawal agreement, it's not clear whether we will continue to have local voting rights, and it will be very varied across the EU 27 countries.
Certainly in our discussions with the Italian officials and government, it's an area that at the moment they don't really want to deal with because it's such a hot political thing in Italy. So in a sense we have kind of backed off any discussion with them, accepting for the moment that they really don't want to raise the issue of whether we get any voting rights, because we have had, as EU citizens, we've had the right to vote in local elections. That will probably go, but we've kind of accepted we have to put that on the back burner for now because of everyone here should be aware of what's going on in Italy, so we can't raise it.
And I wanted also to go back to what Delia was saying.
No, I was just saying, does that mean if you're out of the country for 15 years,
You lose your
there's
voting
a
rights.
great possibility that you won't have any voting rights in one country or in another?
Yes, yes. No voting rights anywhere.
Yes.
No voting rights anywhere. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a complete, disenfranchisement. Yeah. Yes, I won't take much longer. So I don't know if any of you have followed what's happened, but I just wanted to pick up what Delia was saying, just to show you how this sort of political football game has happened over the past 2 years of tit for tat, really. The UK came up with a very reductive proposal at the beginning, on citizens' rights, and basically what we've ended up with is this settled status, they called it, which is obviously much less than what Europeans had in the UK. And this is the model that we discovered last a year ago, just over a year ago, that the EU was also proposing, they were giving member states a choice, as Delia was saying, either the constitutive, where you have to apply, make an application to stay in your home, basically, with the danger that the application could be rejected, or simply swap what you have for another card. So the UK, of course, was the one that put the constitutive approach and model and application system on the table. So what European nationals are faced with now, even if they've lived in the UK for 40 years, that's all they know. They have to apply to stay in their own home. And pay £65 for that. If they don't have an Android phone, or they don't have a microchipped, whatever, passport, latest generation of passports, they also have to go to a centre, take a day off, go to a centre to have their passport checked. And they have to they have criminal checks run on everyone above the age of 10. Yes. And so it's just been very, very hurtful that everybody is now. And don't forget, what I said earlier, the UK had never put in place, had never applied the controls and checks that are written into the free movement legislation, EU legislation, so nobody was ever asked to register as here. And of course, initially, there were huge fears, which thankfully were then allayed, that people would be asked for comprehensive sickness insurance, because nobody ever knew, anybody who wasn't working or was a student in the UK had ever known, or universities had ever informed students about the need to have this insurance. And nobody that I knew had ever applied for a permanent residence after 5 years of staying in the country. In fact, I was one of the last lucky ones who managed to apply for citizenship without the need for first having had the permanent residence, and I did that in 2012. So all my friends in the UK have now applied, because of this precarious situation of our rights in the UK, they've all applied for citizenship. But applying for citizenship in the UK costs about £13,000 and writing. Yes. 1,300 pounds. Sorry. 1,300. Yes. Sorry. Which is still a hell of a lot of money if you consider, say, maybe a family needing to apply. And, that's applied to kids as well.
Yeah.
So, it's just quite a dramatic situation at the moment, and of course the tabloids have been completely against Europeans in a very similar way to what you see here with the whole anti-immigrant feeling. It's the same transposed to the UK anti-European feeling. Anyway, I think that's enough. I just wanted to sort of convey the emotion and sort of give a bit more of the, fill the political gaps of why negotiations have gone one way or another, and not justify, because I don't agree with the approach that the EU has taken. I think that was very myopic. But I understand why it happened, because we saw it up close and personal.
Could I just add one little word? It's on exactly the same point that Cos has just raised, and that is that in our discussions with the Italian officials, one of the things they keep coming back to whenever we try to get a little more information, particularly in our meeting on 20th of December, as to what exactly they meant by this new status and how it was going to be brought into effect with health insurance or not, and so on, was, well, yes, it's all subject to reciprocity, but what was this reciprocity that they were referring to? There are areas in which it just doesn't exist, or there are areas where Britain has already guaranteed, for example, guaranteed access to health care, even in the event of a no deal, to the EU citizens, but we are still in that position of being told, well, yes, we want to make sure you can all go ahead with your health care, but it's subject to reciprocity. Well, what reciprocity? So there's a lot of work we need to do here on those things.
Maybe one thing we haven't mentioned is that what we still feel would be the ideal solution in this political mess is ring fencing. I don't know how fair you are with the withdrawal agreement, but it was the withdrawal agreement mainly dealt with the financial settlement, citizens' rights, and Northern Ireland, and the transition period. These were the four key things that the withdrawal agreement tried to address. And what we've been asking for, well, actually since the beginning really, was...
One of the first things.
Yes, well, even before there was a structure to the withdrawal agreement, we said, take us out of the equation. As I said, as you wouldn't really negotiate over the kids, really. Well, some people I suppose do, but in a divorce, you try to sort of safeguard, in this case, citizens' rights. And so what we're calling for now, what we've called for all along, has been to ring fence the citizens' rights part of the withdrawal agreement, because so much time and effort has gone into negotiating that part, trying to solve and address all the reciprocal issues, safeguard the reciprocal arrangements to do with pensions, healthcare, right to work, cross-border service provision, everything. I mean, we've followed each and every round of the negotiations since June 2017, so we know, because we've been there all along. Why throw it all away if there is no deal, when they've spent so long, painstakingly putting it all together? But politically, it hasn't flown.
But excuse me, I mean, surely if we are Italian taxpayers, residents, homeowners in Italy, we will have access to healthcare. We pay all our taxes. If we pay all our taxes, not necessarily.
It depends.
So without citizenship, we might not have access to healthcare.
If you're an Italian citizen, that's different from being resident.
Sure.
If you're an Italian citizen, then obviously you have access to same as any other Italian citizen. The problem with things like healthcare is that the type of access and how you access it, your right to access it, determined by your residence, your work, your activity, if you like. If you're actively working and you're paying in, then you have access. And that will continue. That will continue so long as you've got a right to work. Yeah? You've got a right to work. If you take yourself out of the equation as a British citizen who's been here as an EU resident and put yourself in the position of an extracomunitari arriving, you have to have a visa to get into the country, which states the basis on which you're coming in. Your vista will determine your particular status, and there are a whole range of categories depending on the work you're going to do. You have to have a work permit. You may come in under one of these. There's a blue card system scheme for particular types of workers. There's a whole series of different schemes.
Really go through this process.
Let me finish. Those would give you the basis on which you come into the country and you work. Now, that would also affect how you access things like health. We have been here as European citizens, so our basis, and based on which we access things like health, are determined by the European system of social security arrangements for everybody. And that means that if you've been here working, you're paying IMSS, so you have your access to health through that. If you are here and you've got a long-term residence, because you've been resident for more than 5 years, and you become a European citizen long-term resident, you have a right to access health. If you're a pensioner in your first 5 years of residence, you access it through having an S1, because that is the equivalent of health insurance. If you are a European citizen but an inactive person, in the beginning you would require health insurance. At the end of your 5 years, if you apply for long-term residence, you don't need health insurance. But we are now being put into a completely new category. And this has nothing to do with citizenship. We're only talking here really about residence. Citizenship is quite separate. This is your right to be here, legally resident here, with whatever attendant rights go with that. And some of them seem slightly banal, but for example, before the Italian government's assurance to us that we actually would not become illegal in the event of no deal, we were faced with a situation which I was presented with suddenly in December, which I hadn't realised, I hadn't even thought about it. I went to renew the insurance on my car. I have a car, Italian registered car, which I'm only entitled to because I'm legally resident here, because without a resident, you can't own a car in Italy. I know you can buy every house in the entire country, you can't own a car. As a non-resident, you can buy everything. But then you also can't drive it because you haven't got insurance, and you can only have the insurance, Italian insurance on your Italian car if you're resident. So suddenly, faced with this, the agent said, yes, but on the 30th of March, well, okay, yes, between December and March, that's fine, but on the 30th of March, your insurance is not going to be valid anymore because you're not going to be an EU citizen. You won't be legally resident here. So I couldn't even drive down the hill to go shopping because I'd have no insurance. That is why, when you start taking apart what was going to be the situation had the Italian government not said, we're going to make sure you retain legal residence on the 30th of March, the daily implications of all of what was about to happen to us are really quite scary.
It's even worse in the UK because I'm sure you've all heard of Theresa May's hostile environment.
Yeah.
So you lose the right to work, you lose the right to rent, you lose the right to open a bank account, anything, and everybody is out to get you because landlords can get fined, so no one's going to touch you with a barge pole.
Yeah.
And the trouble that we have in the UK is that the trouble we have in the UK is that they're saying that they're not even giving people a card to show, but you're going to be a number in a system. So imagine, being a day worker in a field in Wales, or wanting to rent from an elderly landlord, who's never used the internet or doesn't have a mobile phone. How are you going to prove your status? And they can rent to somebody else. And unfortunately, the whole prima gli italiani, Americans first or UK first, is against us. Yeah.
At least the Italian government has assured us that that is not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that the point here is that the December 20th meeting was positive, and they said that they want to give us all our continued rights to be here, rights to healthcare, rights to protect family, etc., etc., etc. But the point we're making is that they've got to legislate to do that. So we've been given a word, which is great. It's a big relief. We feel a lot more relaxed. But the point is they now have to legislate. So that's what the work that needs to go on now, to make sure not just that they legislate, that they do it right, Because as we all know, in Italy, they do things, it often comes too late and then it's not right the first time. We really can't afford to take that kind of risk. So what we're doing is putting pressure on to make sure they do it in time and they do it right first time.
Yeah, they have assured us we're not going to become illegal on the 30th of March. That is great, and we'll have a transition period when they finally sort out whatever this legislation is. So it is possible, I mean, this would be, if it all gets too late, that they have to pass some urgent last-minute decree to say, it's okay, you're all legal still for another 6 to 9 months, while we sort out the precise details of the legislation. Either way, what they have assured us is we will remain legal on the 30th, and that's the essential thing, because almost everything else flows from that. The right to work, etc. We should open it up.
Shall we take some questions?
Can I just ask about